Welcome back to another 5105 show with yours truly and our in season guest, Justin Lima, Dr. Justin Lima, Coach Justin Lima. I don't even know what to call you. So many
Just call me
titles.
coach. Just call me Justin. Government name's always what I told the players. So
Coach Justin Lima. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm excited for this, man. We're in season. It's not only Cyhawk week, but like now we can talk about in season, and
Yeah.
I could talk about this forever.
Yeah. Excited to talk about the in-season stuff. Obviously, we did. For those that have missed the first couple shows, go back because they're not time sensitive. They are as far as us kind of following the season schedule, but the information and topics that we discussed are certainly not something you have to listen to week of to get value out of. So here we are. We've now made it into the season. The Hawks are 1-0. Did you watch this weekend?
I did.
Is it you're from, we talked about it. You're from the East Coast. You were with the Hawks for 5 or 6 years or whatever. Are you a fan? Are you a Hawkeye fan now? Like, do you,
Yeah,
or
we
are you
are.
just,
My wife went to school there. Her whole
oh,
family went
okay.
to school there. So yeah.
Okay. Because I could see how it would be just, you have Towson, you have all these, like, you could be a fan of somebody else. I don't know. It could be.
Yeah,
Do you
no, I
have?
mean I could be a fan of Maryland. I worked there too, but I'm
Yeah.
definitely like the fact that having the amount of time at Iowa and the amount of growth that I was able to have, yeah, like we have. I mean, I got the Geno jersey behind me. We have
Right.
Hawkeye stuff in the house. Yeah.
Cool. Cool. Pretty good showing for week one.
It was, I mean, it's you want to always when you come off of a win as the strength coach, you sometimes treat the guys like it was a loss, and sometimes after loss, you treat them like it was a win, right? And you kind of bring them down like that Sunday. It's like, yeah, enjoy the win, but you're like, hey, we played an FCS opponent. Like, let's not. I'll never forget when you got your special teams player of the week against Minnesota because like you think you made some tackles, and I think Doyle's exact words were "Don't strain your rotator cuff, patting yourself on the back." And you almost want to do that, like, "Hey,
How do you
don't."
remember that?
I have an impeccable memory, man.
Dude, yeah. I did if wow. You're right, because you're right. I did get it against Minnesota. Holy smokes. That's incredible pull from you right there.
Yeah,
Good
and
for you.
because I mean, it was the whole new change with where they were and weren't allowed to cover you, and that actually was part of how we trained the specialists or the long snappers specifically at Towson because of that rule and what we would do with them during practice. But you ran down there and you made that guy, you made tackles, you made him think about you, right? And so that's what you tell the team after a win. You're like, hey, always Coach Ferentz will always say, hey, we're always happy for other people's success. It's always good to get the win, and then hey, let's remember and keep it in perspective. It was an FCS opponent. We were supposed to get the win. Good job. We did it. Now let's turn our attention to, our in-state rival.
Yeah. I think it's God, it kills me that you remember that. I wish I had a memory like you did. Um, of which, by the way, for those that are listening to the show or watching, before we started this a few weeks back, Justin was he was sending me all these things about like stuff that had happened during our time, and I was like, Jesus Christ, is this like it's like talking about Sheriff's injury and him coming back, which was like a memorable thing even for me, but
Dude.
um I mean that like, but you sent me like 6 other things that happened, just like stuff that you remember about other stuff, and I was just like, I don't know how he's doing that. But yeah, we're in season. They were supposed to win. It wasn't a lesser opponent, but it was a lesser opponent. I mean, it it's the reality. And actually, that was part of what I wanted to get into today is I don't know if it's true. I don't know if there's statistics to back it up, but there's definitely a narrative out there that when it comes to because a lot of strength conditioning side of things is about preventing injuries. Uh, especially in season, you're trying to manage workload, volume. We talked about that the last couple weeks. Do you think FCS programs experience injuries at a higher rate?
Uh, I think when they play like,
Or when they play
yeah,
FBS teams?
yeah, and especially when they play in Iowa, like you saw that kind of like they're getting hit a little bit harder. You're playing bigger, like it's. I think it's possible. I don't think it always shows up necessarily the same black and white way as people might think. Like, all right, you're playing in Iowa, they're already a physical team. I think more of what you saw was the fact that it's coming off of camp and it's week 1. So part of why I say that is if coaches and teams don't program properly, what happens is players just do the survival shuffle and they don't ever really go super hard because every day is they don't have their high and low days where high can be really high and everything's just kind of and the players just want to survive. So they're not going to try really hard. Then all of a sudden you go and you play a game and it really matters. Tackling is harder, sprint efforts are harder, which is why you see the cramping and you see some of those injuries because it might be the first time they've ever really been hit. So that's the flip side of what we talked about last week with Charlotte, I believe was the school where they practiced too hard. Well, now if you practice too easy and you go and you experience an opponent because, that was week 1 for the FCS team when we played Florida down in the swamp in week 5 at Towson, we had no injuries. And like we should have been an FCS school against an SEC team, Florida in the swamp. But we made it out injury free. But again, we're 5 weeks into the season. We had our acute workload built up. Like the guys were more durable.
Yeah. I just think it's seems to be, and a lot of our discussion around on the main episodes is a lot of times FCS programs can hang in that first half because they got dudes too. Like
Yep.
they have some dudes in FCS. There are some guys that just for whatever reason they didn't get noticed in high school. They came from the wrong area that doesn't get a lot of recruit, whatever it may be. But then it starts to drop off in that second half as the time goes on in a game. They get tired at a slightly quicker rate. They get their depth isn't quite as good. They can't rotate as many guys who can make a difference in on special teams. So you get to that third, fourth quarter, and that's where sometimes with a team like Iowa who likes to keep it close, although who knows, maybe after
Maybe they're
the
not.
well, coach, the new OC Lester said, if we don't have to keep it close, like that's cool too, right? He said
Yeah.
that like a pregame interview. I tend to think that like Coach Ferentz finds this little joy in like winning close games. Um but yeah, I think it's interesting, and they just don't have the resources at the FCS level that Iowa does. And it's not the biggest thing in the world. It's no excuse. They still have to go play, but like they don't eat like Iowa does.
They don't
They
eat like Iowa does, and the line like that's the one of the biggest things is the linemen, right? Like Power 5 linemen versus FCS linemen, they
That's
can
what I
wear
hear
on
all the
you.
time. It's funny you
That's
say that.
that's one of the biggest. Like even when we played Wake Forest 2018 at Towson, and bro, it was 14-14. Like they scored, we scored, they scored, we scored. Like our quarterback, Tom Flacco, was the younger brother of Joe, the NFL quarterback. So like we had a good quarterback and we had skill players that could play.
Yeah.
But the line eventually, O line, D line, they're not the same. And again, even at a Wake Forest, people are like, oh, Wake Forest. There's because again, you're still paying kids their full ride, their cost of, and all the NIL money nowadays. So linemen, and now when you're talking about an Iowa, like
They start to wear down.
that dude 95 was a freak. Watching him play, that was fun to see. I don't know
Aaron
his
Graves,
name. Yeah,
the D lineman.
yeah.
Yeah, he's got a really cool story actually. I don't know how much you follow that, probably not much, but supposedly he was one of those like all-American, played in an all-American game. I think he played in like the blue gray all-American game, whatever. So you don't get many of those at Iowa. I played in all-American. But that's the douchiest thing I've ever said. But no, he was like an all-American and supposedly would have been a 5-star, but he committed so early to Iowa and he was so dead set on being a Hawkeye. I think it was like his freshman year
Oh wow.
that like the recruiting services and all those ranking services basically just like kind of laid off him because there was no reason to continue like ranking him. He didn't go to any more camps. He was like, nah, once Iowa offers, I'm a Hawkeye and that's it. Um,
Yeah, you could tell he was special. He looked different in
he's
that
already
95.
graduated college.
Really?
He already has his degree. It's like his second year.
Huh.
He came into college with like 2 years already done. He's absurd.
He's a pro's pro then. Good for him.
Absolutely. He's like a 10-year NFL vet. 100%.
Yeah.
We might have a couple of those on the defense right now, which is not uncommon, but it is fun to watch. Anyway, All right, what do we got? We talked a little FCS. What are our considerations now? We move into, we talk summer. Summer, you don't have anything. It's just like pure, you can just live strength conditioning. And then you gotta dial it back for camp in its own way. And then you have to shift it in a similar sense. It's still dialed back, but now instead of having a ton of football stuff and your training, now you have football stuff, school stuff, and you gotta throw strength conditioning on top of that. What are the specific in-season considerations now that we have classes, we have a weekly schedule, game schedule, it's turning over after every Saturday, although they're trying to put college football games on every
Mm.
day of the week now, which is weird, and I'm sure we'll get to that at some point this season. What does that look like?
That you hit the nail on the head with the fact that football is gonna be on every day. You gotta just reverse engineer that. Hey, when are the things that you know are gonna happen and you can't change? So, alright, do we have any game on Friday? Do we have an odd week because of that? When's our bye week? Okay. And then you don't wanna like, the public will never hear this, but as a strength coach, you do think like, "Okay, this game's going to be tougher physically. Like, let's make sure that we're accommodating that with respect to the percentages that we're putting on the athletes. Hey, this team, this FCS team, okay, we can actually lift a little bit heavier this week. Hey, this opponent, like, you're doing that behind closed doors because you know that the effort and the CNS that is going to be required of the guys on that game day is going to cost more. So you
Yeah.
do that and you're periodizing it like, all right, the exercises themselves might not change, but hey, it might be a scheduled deload this week because of it. Or hey, let's actually crank it up and let's touch on that quality that we haven't hit in a little bit because we know, we should be able to win this game.
Yeah, I mean, you guys, you would never come out and say that, but
No.
it's also not you guys like pontificate. Like you guys have the data behind it to be like, okay, we know pretty well like what this is going to look like versus this. Um and that's important because if you're not using data, then you're probably dumb. Uh let's just be honest. Um let's talk about groups as far as lifting groups and how you guys break those up. If I remember correctly, it was like Devo 1, Devo 2, intermediate, and advanced. You can
Seam in
correct
advanced.
Yeah,
Yep.
you can correct me on that. Explain groups to me and what the purposes of those are.
So to you and to everybody listening, the whole purpose of it is just think about it like English or math in college. You're not going to do trigonometry before you understand math, 2 plus 2, subtraction, parentheses, all of that. Same thing with your lifting groups. You are not going to do more advanced movements with athletes that don't understand very simply how to even move, how to lift heavy weight, how to strain. It is inappropriate. You're giving the athlete an inappropriate stress too early, and then you're also not giving them that advanced stress when you need it. So when you seniors, you need advanced methodologies, you need the French contrast, you need the chains, you need the bands. Well, if we give that to you right away because it looks cool and it sounds great, well, guess what are we supposed to do once you actually need that adaptation, right?
Yep.
Like, you play the trick play too early, well, guess what? Now what are you supposed to do? You can only go to the well so many times. So the younger athletes, typically younger in age, is also going to correlate with their training age because chances are they haven't lifted a lot. You do have special cases like oh my gosh, Amani Jones. Like, Amani came in and it's like, yeah, you're not going to be on the Devo 1 card. Like, at the very least, we're going to put you on Devo 2 and we're going to expedite you through to the team card and the advanced card quicker. Some schools have certain criteria, like you have certain standards for, your bilateral. It could be a squat, could be a deadlift, whatever. But you have like, hey, you have to hit these criteria. In some schools, it's one of or all of them, whatever. But you have to take that data plus the qualitative how they move, and then be like, all right, this kid is advanced. We're going to move him up to these other lift cards. And so that's the gist of it. Simpler movements, simpler percentages, simpler actual weight on the bar when they're younger.
Standards that you mentioned there are those like ratios? Are you
Yeah,
talking
strength
about
to
like
body weight ratios.
yeah. So kid comes in and he can't. I don't know if this has ever been the case, but if he can't, if he doesn't have a 1-to-1 body weight to back squat ratio, it's like, yeah, we're not gonna throw him down the line of like all these advanced lifts until we can just back squat, how much we weigh. Um,
Yep.
which is low. I don't what would a back squat, would it be like 1.5 or 2?
Yeah, it's usually at least 1.5 because, like, let's just use simple terms. If you're a 200-pound kid, if you can't, back squatting 350 would be 1.5. But nowadays, a lot of coaches are switching it to either a trap bar deadlift or a split squat. And again, there's a lot of different metrics that
Yeah,
coaches will
you're right,
use,
you're right. I'm pulling out the back squat, and
which is fine.
back
Again,
squat
some
is
coaches
like
do.
old school now. Back squat is like, the people don't even
That's
back
so
squat.
that's so early
It's
2000s.
so 2000s, dude. You don't even single leg split squat now? What do you like,
What are you
you're
even doing?
yeah, what do you even do? Like, I don't even know if athletes at Elon know what a back squat is.
Here's the thing, they do. Like, if you watch what they do, they front squat, they'll even back squat. Like, and they, I mean, they front squat a lot too. Like,
Oh, they're
they
so strong.
exactly. And, like, again, it sounds great that they don't squat, but it's like when you watch what they do squatting motions.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. They're working the movement pattern.
Correct.
I think it's probably the coolest thing from a strength conditioning standpoint, because you got in a college strength conditioning program, we only care about number one, performance on the field or the court, or like that is paramount, right? You guys, as much as you personally, Justin Lima or Nick DeMarco or Coach Doyle loves just having a big old, I think Coach Doyle had like a powerlifting back, or like as much as he personally would love to see a 700-pound squat, doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you hang clean 400. We had a lot of guys who could, but it only matters in the context of, can you translate that to the field? Is it translating to your athleticism? And so that means that the way in which you do things, the ingredients that you use, or the strategies that you use, they don't have to be tied down to this certain thing. We're not our game day is very, there's 100 million different things that happen on a football field. None of them happen exactly the way they do in the weight room. So you're just training movements, general movement patterns, and intense effort. And that allows you guys to get really creative. And to be honest, the shift of that, which in a very, like, in one example, like we're talking about the back squat, moving away from the back squat to something like a front squat or some other kind of squat pattern, moving away from a hang clean with straps that might be a little dangerous to somebody's wrist that doesn't have great mobility, into a weighted jump just from the hip, or a trap bar dead jump. um I've you correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like maybe college strength conditioning has gotten a lot smarter in the last 10 years.
We have, and you got to remember, we're still in the infancy. Like, Boyd Epley has been considered the grandfather of college strength and conditioning. And I'm writing about this actually because I'm writing a textbook for a publisher, Cognella.
Oh,
The
God.
book is called
You're
Navigating a
writing a
Career.
textbook?
Yeah, it's not going to be a full tech. It's going to be their professional book.
Okay.
So, like, not fully. We'll dive into kind of the X's and O's of program design, but more of like, hey, how you're supposed to lay out your weight room. The book's called Navigating a Career in Strength and Conditioning. So I kind of researched it a little bit. So Boyd Epley was at Nebraska when they first started exercising. Um, and then,
When they
oh my,
first started exercising.
seriously though, like, when he did it in the 70s, it was a big deal that they were like going to actually exercise as a team, right? They
Really?
had talent, but like the fact of them lifting, it was so foreign, right?
So
Because again,
before you're telling me before 1970,
they really didn't lift in season because
they just practiced football and that was it?
it was the whole notion of like, we're going to get big and bulky. And then,
Oh my
my
god.
gosh, what was his name at the Dallas Cowboys? But he was the first employed, and he worked in the National Football League for the Cowboys, Al Roy. And it was very, like, it was weird that the strength coaches would be trained. So again, we haven't even been a profession for 100 years. Like,
Wow.
being able to retire as a strength coach is not a lot of them. And so, yeah, we've advanced a lot because we're still super, super, super young. And that's been the thing that we were at Iowa. And that's what Coach Doyle took pride in and made sure that we, as his staff, knew, because we're a reflection of him and he was a reflection of Coach Ferentz. But Coach Ferentz, when he got hired in 99, he's like, hey, and he said it, and I'm sure you remember it, and any former players, but we have to excel in the area of special teams and strength and conditioning. We can't be normal based off of who we are. And so we were always ahead of the curve. Like I said, when I was running the GPS in 2013, we were one of 4 countries. We were
Yep.
doing HRV before HRV was cool. We were doing tendos back when a handful of other teams were doing tendos. Now everybody has VBT. Now everybody has force plates. One of the areas that we didn't was like we still printed, I think they still print on lift cards versus the other softwares, but you have to evolve, and it can't just be, well, this is how we've always done it.
Yeah.
You have to evolve and keep the principles, but evolve and do what's right.
Because I think, you get, because here's the thing, right? You go in and you do bench and squat and deadlift, you're gonna get results.
Correct. There's nothing wrong with it. You're
Because
right.
you're gonna get strong. So what's really hard about that as a staff or maybe as a whole in the industry back in the 90s or the 2000s, you start lifting weights and you're like, "Oh shit, this is great. This is awesome. Our guys are getting so strong." And then you realize like, but we got a lot of guys with back problems. Like or something, right? And like how do we it's really hard to go away from stuff that works.
Mm,
And I think it's awesome because again, it's just about the performance on the field. It's not like a powerlifting meet where you have to deadlift, you have to bench, you have to squat because that is what's being tested. So, um, I think it's awesome. I think when I look in when Elon or Nick posts a video of their strength conditioning or what they're doing in the weight room or out on the field, some of their 8 vector stuff, like it is it is like I don't know, it's like looking into the future. I just love everything that comes out of there. So, obviously Nick is he's kind of a special guy when it comes to that stuff. So, um and he loves CrossFit, which is great. I really connect with the guy on everything. Um okay, so we got our groups. We got our groups based on young guys. Think of it as like it doesn't exactly work this way, but like you're going to advance through them. You're eventually going to be on an advanced card. And how is that structured for each group? Because a lot of the advanced guys, not all of them, but a lot, are going to be getting a lot of playing time. There's an amount of game volume and practice volume that's going on with each of these guys that's on a card, and it's a little bit correlative, right? The freshman guys, except for this Reese Vanderzee kid who caught 2 touchdowns, what a stud.
right.
And he's a good example to maybe bring up, but a lot of his peers, a lot of the kids that he's in the dorm with right now, they're not playing.
Correct.
They're not even in the 2 deep. They're on scout team. And it's not intentional, but like, we could beat them up a little bit. Like they can go through Devo, they can get crushed on scout team, and then they're also going to lift a little harder
Yep.
than the advanced guys. So what does that look like? How many times is a freshman versus senior lifting, and what does the intensity of those lifts look like compared to each other?
Keeping it super high level. If you're not playing, you're lifting 3 days a week. If you played a lot, you're lifting 2 days a week. And if you played a little bit, you're lifting 3 days a week. So you got your 3 categories. It's either 3 or 2. Then if you played a lot, your volume is not going to be a lot because you're playing a lot and you need to play a lot. Then if you're not playing a lot, your volume needs to be high so that way you can develop. It's your in season of strength and conditioning while you're also in season because you don't have that stimulus on Saturday. So you need to get that stimulus so you can develop. Now, those tweeners, the guys that play special teams, they're a backup, they're that 6th offensive lineman. They're a little bit more tricky because they can't just be thrown into the fire and done a ton of work, and they can't be pampered because they have to be prepared if their number gets called. So they're a little bit trickier, and that's with respect to, Sunday, the day after the game. If you played a lot, you're going to do your shakeout and recovery. If you didn't play at all, you're lifting super heavy. And then if you're that in-betweener, you're going to do that lift, but it's going to be a little bit scaled back. Now, the case of that freshman wide receiver who played a ton, sure, he's going to be on a 2 deep lift card, but that's where we talk about there's going to be progressions and regressions. So if the advanced players are doing speed band squats, well, he's not going to be doing speed band squats. He's either doing a goblet squat, he's doing a
Yeah,
front squat, or he's doing a back squat, and it's just straight weight. And it might have some tempo to teach him how to properly move. So it'll be that 2-day lift card, but it'll be a regressed version of all the
I
exercises.
guarantee he's got tempo. Reese Van, if anybody wants to know right now what Reese Vanderzee's doing, he's probably, as you listen to this, he's currently hitting a 5-second descent on a goblet squat, and he hates his life. He's definitely doing tempo goblet squat. God, it was so funny every year to watch the freshmen come in and just they're all lined up. I think even you guys would
Beep,
line them up. You guys
beep.
would have, yeah, you guys would
Hit the
have
metronome.
the metronome on because all of them are doing it. And so it's like, all right, we're starting another set. Like everybody line up and do it. It was like, I mean, it was like the most freshman like intro, like first day in camp kind of thing. Like, yeah, everybody line up and get your goblet squat going on. That kid is that makes sense. So that kid's gonna, on a total volume level, he's gonna do a little bit less. He's going to do the 2-day lift card. He's gonna do the regressed kind of complexities,
Yep.
if you will. He's not going to deal with any bands or chains. We're not doing, crazy stuff. Is there I think we'll cap it with this. Is there for a guy like him, is there a consideration? Is there a conversation of, I mean, there has to be. It's like, hey, we got Reese playing a lot. Like he's a brand new guy. Let's monitor him a little extra. Let's check in with him on like a how you feeling level kind of thing. Because who knows how his body is going to react to this. Like we have to stay on top of this a little bit because we don't know what an 18-year-old is going to look like. We don't have a lot of data on this kid. We don't have a whole lot of injury history because he just got here. Is there an extra little asterisk by his name of like, hey, somebody check in with Reese, see how he's doing?
Yes and no. I mean, it's you don't treat him any differently than any of the other players because it's
Sure.
like you're still going to check in with the starters. Hey, how you feeling? But then you take it with a grain of salt because you look at him in terms of, is he a player that is a hard worker and is going to say everything is fine when he's
Yeah.
not? Is he going to be a complainer that says everything is like, so you take it with that grain of salt. And then, yeah, you do respect the fact like, okay, you're a young kid and you're pushing through but you treat him like a person. You have a conversation. Hey man, we saw your HRV is trending in the positive direction. What are you doing to recover so well? See, it's kind of going the negative direction, and then you just mentor the kid of like, hey, you got a spotlight on you right now, man. How are you handling it? And you just use it as a conversation starter. So that's my long-winded answer of not really. You treat him like he's in the too deep with everybody else because you're 50 or senior. You're dealing with that with shoot the kid Jay Higgins, who's probably like he's got a big limelight on him. And hey, how are you handling the pressure that you
Yeah.
have? So it's like they just all have different types of pressure
I didn't even think about the psychological stressor of like, he's now big man on campus, right? Like that is something that adds to the weekly load of like what he's feeling
of life.
and of life. Like now all of a sudden he's walking to class and he's the kid who scored 2 touchdowns and it's like he can't just go to class because he was in the end zone twice on Saturday and people know who he is and he kind of has to be on all the time now. He's people know who he is. I never had to deal with that. That's why I look so young. I had no stress in my life. It's interesting. Well, I'm excited to hopefully this kid keeps balling out and we get a couple other young guys who start contributing, but a lot to talk about as we move into this season. I've got about 10 more topics just lined up on this document over here to discuss, and we're going to keep coming at you every Friday with the 5-10-5 show this year. I think that's it. Any last words on that, Justin?
No, I mean, I'm excited to talk about how the guys come off of a rivalry game because again, your
Yeah.
CNS dumps, like that is again something you as a coach have to talk about. And so it'd be interesting, this is going to come out the day before the game, interested to watch the game and be able to, talk about that stressor in our next episode.
That is different. That is different. We'll make sure to hit on that next week. Thank you guys for joining us. We'll see you then. Peace.